Spanning the globe to bring you the constant variety of art, it's the Tenet Podcast. I'm Todd Pearson, coming to you from the 40 West Arts District in Lakewood, Colorado, and joining me from the Lair of the Bear in Rapid City, South Dakota, my partner and friend, you know him as quite possibly the most interesting man in the world, Wes Brown.
Todd, how you doing? Oh my God, it's another week.
It's another week. It's good to see your face.
Say
It's
that
a little
all
later
the time.
than we usually go. You look a little tired.
Oh, well, it's a little late for us. This is like, typically we don't go this late.
Well, typically we don't, but I'm always up this late
Yeah,
because I'm a night owl.
Well, I typically am too, but man, lately I've been going to bed early. I don't know what's wrong with me. Age is kicking in. I'll tell you what, when you turn 60, you like naps. So naps are a thing for me now.
I think you need a vitamin B12 shot or something.
I take that every day.
Do you?
I got my wife puts me on, like fish oil or omega-3s and, good God. Every now and then she'll patch me with her secret patches. I'll be sleeping and I'll wake up with a patch on my face. So all for my health.
Did you ever watch Mad Men?
I did not. I mean, I caught episodes of it, pieces of it. Yeah, I don't know why, because it looked good, but I just never got into it.
So Barb, my wife, has been binging that again.
Oh, okay.
And there's an episode where they bring in this doctor and he injects all the creatives with this concoction. Basically, it just speeds them out for like 72 hours. And they're just running manically all around the offices, and they're trying to get an ad pitch done, but it's pretty amusing. Anyway.
That reminds me, remember when we played City Ball and you played that one time? I think it might have been that game where I downed like 2 Red Bulls, like first time in my life, and then I played basketball. Shit, I thought I was going to die. Red Bulls and basketball. I mean, I was full of energy.
You were full of energy. I do remember that. You're kind of aggro on the court too.
Yeah.
I remember that.
Yeah, I'm pretty intense. That's when I broke my thumb. Not that game, but I broke my thumb playing basketball too. Then I was like, screw it. Let's play.
We were just young bucks then.
We were playing City Ball.
I don't even know if I could run up and down the court once.
I know.
I need to be like, screw you.
I had no shot, but I played D because I was aggressive. But I have no like shooting skills. Didn't in high school, didn't in City League. Thank God for people like Dan Miller. Tommy actually was pretty good.
Tommy was good.
Yeah, so
that was fun.
I think he still plays pickup ball every now and then. But anyway, he looks like Santa Claus now. That his big old beard.
The old man.
Anyway, all right, we digress.
Yes, talking about the good old days.
The good old days, reminiscing.
Our glory days. Hey, thanks for joining us. Remember, you can always find out what we're up to via our social media on Instagram at Tenet Podcast, our Tenet Podcast Facebook page, and then, of course, our website, tenetpodcast.com.
Nice.
Maintained by our lovely webmaster and Wes's wife, Tonette.
I remind her that we just released, so I didn't see her running to the bedroom to update our website, so I'll have to give her a gentle nudge this weekend. Now that she's working full time again. So,
well, I appreciate her. So
we do.
You let her know that I appreciate her hard work making our website look nice.
That's right.
All right, let's talk some art.
Let's do it.
Our guest this week is a photographer and professor of photography at the University of Wyoming. He has a solo exhibition at our friend Bill Thomason's gallery, Bitfactory, entitled Western Extraction, that is on display through March the 14th. You can follow him on Instagram at Bailey_Russel, and you can check out his work at his website, baileyrussel.wordpress.com. Bailey, thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me. Great to see you guys.
Yeah, it's great to see you, Bailey. I appreciate you taking this late evening and sitting down with us for a couple hours and talking about photography and art in general. Looking forward to it. So how did you get to the University of Wyoming? Because we don't think about University of Wyoming. Well, I mean, we do because the Cowboys and stuff. But how did you get to the University of Wyoming?
A little complicatedly.
Okay.
So I'm from the East Coast. I'm from New Jersey,
Oh,
and I lived in New York City for a long time. I went to grad school there. But then my wife and I moved to Seattle for a job of hers she was a postdoc in fish biology. And then she was offered a job at the University of Wyoming about 15 years ago, and I was the spousal hire for that.
nice.
So I went along for the ride. The university's art department did not have photography, had never had photography. And coincidentally, they were in the process of designing and building a brand new building. This is in about 2011 or so.
Mhm.
So they'd been working on this for a bunch of years, and they had sort of carved out some extra flexible spaces in it. And in the middle of this process, we walked in and they said, yes, we'd love to have photography. And so we were able to carve out a little section. And I started working there when we opened the building in 2012, in the spring of 2012. So it just sort of worked out perfectly in that way.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. That sounded great.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that sounds really fortuitous that right
Mhm.
place, right time, man.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's not a lot else going on in Laramie, so it would have been hard to move there without a job.
Yeah,
So
for
that
sure.
worked out perfectly. Yeah.
And Wyoming, Powell, the university, or well, I think is it
Northwest.
considered a junior university or
It's a community
junior
college.
community
Yeah.
college? They have well, they did this back when I was in college in the 90s. They had a really good photography school there. So
Yeah, they've got a very really solid, like technically solid program up there.
yeah,
Incredible facility and great gear. And they do these trips into Yellowstone pretty regularly with their students and other things
oh,
like that. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So that's what I know about photography in Wyoming.
Yep. No, we've it's the university has there's some small programs at each of the community colleges, and we talk to all of them and know all of their professors, and it's a good group of people now.
Good.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, that's exciting.
Now, are you the sole photography instructor at the
Yep.
University of Wyoming?
Yes, I'm one deep, which is problematic and also sort of lovely. It means I get to do whatever I want to do, but it also means my students only hear from me over and over and over again. So I try to bring in as many people to talk to them
Sure.
and give
Right.
them different opinions from mine as much as possible. But yeah, I teach two intro level classes, a digital and black and white darkroom class, and then I teach an advanced class that sort of changes every year. It's whatever basically I want to do each year. So this year we're doing a book arts class, and last year it was a project based, and the year before it was wet plate collodion. So I just sort of shifted around with whatever my interests are at the time.
Oh,
That's
that's
kind of
awesome.
nice when you
Yeah.
just kind of make your own
Yeah,
curriculum and do what you want to do, right?
wonderful amount of flexibility with it. Yeah.
Right on.
Yeah.
And so you have a full-fledged like working black and white darkroom, color darkroom too, or just black and white?
Just a black and white darkroom. It's small. So this was sort of that last second carve out thing. I've got a full classroom with a Mac lab, but then a darkroom that has 8 enlargers in it and a nice size sink. So when I have a large class, it gets a little problematic, but we can do a lot with the darkroom.
Yeah.
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 I mean, 8 enlargers, that's not too bad.
No,
You know?
it's great unless I have 16 students in the class, and then we're cycling through pretty regularly as much as we can. Um,
Is it a 24-hour access darkroom?
Yep. Yeah. Get in anytime. Students literally live there sometimes.
Yeah.
There's a shower in one of the bathrooms downstairs, and you every once in a while hear rumors about students living there. It's fine. Got no problem with that.
Yeah. What the hell, right?
It's the really productive ones, so we encourage that. Yeah.
Yeah, I went to Black Hill State in the 90s. And when I was there, I got lucky to be the university photographer. And so I had my own private dark room, but I also met my wife, and people have heard this, in the dark room because she was taking black and white photography. So I helped
Nice.
her load some film on a reel. So
Uh-huh.
we didn't date then because she was 18 and I was 29. We dated much later when she was older and
Mhm.
age of consent.
They've got a beautiful facility now up there. I've friends
Yeah,
with a couple
yeah.
of their photo professors, and I've actually been up there a few times.
Oh,
It's
good.
yeah.
Yeah.
They got wonderful stuff going
Yeah.
on. They hosted a SPE conference about 3 years ago that I took a whole bunch of students up to there,
Oh,
which was a
cool.
lot of fun. Yeah,
Nice. Did you meet Steve Babbitt then, or was he gone by then?
I think
He
he
might
was
have been
gone.
gone. Yeah, he
Yeah,
might have
and
been
that
gone.
his replacement Alan had just started.
Oh, okay.
So that was Alan I knew from SPE from long before. So
Sure, sure.
yeah, yeah,
Interesting. Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, Steve, there was a couple people that had the program. Steve, like, I think upped the game a little bit. And then now he's in Southern Utah living with his wife, who's a retired doctor. Well, I think she still practices down there, but
Yeah, I think it sounded like he set up a really good technical system. And
yeah,
I
yeah,
think the current people might be a little pushed more into the fine art side of things.
sure. So what's the SP that you're talking about?
Oh, SPE, the Society of Photographic Education. It's a
Oh, okay.
national conference system. They have like a big national conference and then regional conferences, like one regional and one national a year.
Oh, nice.
So we're in the Northwest region. I've hosted it, I don't know, maybe about 8 years ago. I hosted it at this facility my university owns that's literally on Jackson Lake in Grand Teton.
Oh, wow.
Absolutely stunning. Just had like 90 photographers living in cabins on a lake for a weekend,
Oh,
giving
man,
talks and other things like that.
that'd be
But
amazing.
Black Hill State hosted it a little while ago, and Denver hosted the national conference about 2 or 3 years ago, which was a lot of fun. Yeah,
Yeah.
there were great talks and interesting things there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So did you teach before you moved to Wyoming?
I did not. No, I was so I went to grad school at NYU, and then I spent a couple of years working for photographers in New York City. I worked for a woman named Vera Lutter, who is a black and white, large scale pinhole photographer who shows at Gagosian. And then after I stopped working for her, I worked for the Met for a little while, doing digital imaging with them, and then the MoMA doing art installation. And then we moved to Seattle. I wasn't really thinking about teaching at that point. That wasn't really on my agenda. But then coming out here, that was the thing to do. Yeah.
So what were you doing when you were in Seattle?
Seattle, I was working for an art installer, and I started showing a lot in Seattle. So that was when I really started making work as much as I could. But I worked for a company called Art Tech, and I was driving a truck from Seattle to LA to Vancouver and back about a couple times a month to deliver art and pick up art from different places.
Wow.
It was a very interesting experience. Got to
Yeah.
see a lot and get around a lot and get into some pretty crazy collections to pick up different things and take them to auction houses or museums or what have you.
Right on.
Yeah.
That must have been kind of interesting, like you said, and kind of fun.
Yeah, a little boring at times on the road, but really strange stops and different locations, trying to figure out how to get, 800-pound crates into a trailer, into a truck with only one person helping me. And, you're always massively understaffed. And every once in a while, people get seriously hurt by art because it's a bunch of, slightly burned out artists working as installers, handling all these things. So it can get a little sketchy that way, but
That's awesome.
yeah.
So you've been teaching for about 15 years now. What do you like about teaching?
I like that I can basically use it to learn whatever I want to learn. So I get bored very quickly, and I tend to change my curriculum nonstop. And I really enjoy deciding that I want to learn something new, learning it, and then starting to teach it again a couple months later, and using the students to help me learn that. So I learned wet plate collodion. We had a visiting artist come through, a guy named Mark Osterman out of Eastman Kodak, and he's sort of the guy who had reinvented the wet plate process back in the 90s. He taught Sally Mann how to do it and other people like that.
Wow.
And he came through and gave some workshops, and one of my students got really into it. And then over the next 8 months or so, I basically tasked my student Ryan with learning how to do it and teaching me how to do it, and pulling together all the equipment and all the materials that we needed so that we could both start making wet plate work together. And we've actually still been collaborating 10 years later on different projects since then. He's up at Montana State teaching there now. So doing things like that, where it's like I can bring, the learning aspect together, and I get a lot out of it as well. I really enjoy.
Yeah.
Yeah, teaching's a great way to really think about your process and how you do things, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah, it makes me question a lot of what I do all the time and come up with rationales and reasons for it. I mean, I try to, at least definitely in my advanced classes, I try to bring projects that I'm working in and into the class and then explain it to the students. And if I get these blank looks from them, I realize I have to start explaining it better. I have to change what I'm doing. I have to figure out a better system for it. And so that's always been really interesting to have that sounding board. Yeah.
What's great is you're a working photographer and you're producing, you have produced different bodies of work. So you bring a lot of knowledge, to the classroom, but it's also great, I would think from the student perspective to see that your instructor is, actually out there doing it yourself.
Yeah. As a department, we're very aggressive about that. In that, so when they built our building, they actually built our offices right across from our classrooms with studios attached to our offices. And the idea was that these are working studios, and we want to show that we're all working artists and that they're right here, so we can just bring our students into them if we need to. And so every once in a while in class, they'll be like, oh, we should look at this thing. All right, let's all go walk in here and I'll pull out some prints and we'll look at the prints here and we can, discuss how I made these and things like that. And I know the other professors are doing the same thing pretty regularly. So that was a very important philosophy for the department, but also just a way to make that happen physically with the structure of the building.
Yeah, that's brilliant.
Nice. Yeah.
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 Do you teach lighting there as well? Do you have studio that people can come in and they can
Yeah.
check out lighting and play with lighting, that sort of thing?
No, not much. I do a little. I have some lights. We play with them, and I don't for two reasons. It's not my forte. I know that I'm not good at that. That is not where my strengths are. And we never built a studio. That wasn't
Gotcha.
to the building. So I have to focus on other things. But yeah, we'll do lighting days and intro digital where I pull out the lights that we have and we go wander around the building and take portraits and do other types of setups. But it's one of the things I'm least comfortable with in photography. I never really learned lighting systems and have had to teach myself what little I know. And I don't really use that in my own work much at all.
Yeah. Plus, it's expensive because you
Yeah.
have to upkeep of all that equipment too. So
Yeah.
I can see why they wouldn't have that sort of thing.
Yeah, I buy whenever I can find a grant. I buy some gear and, stow it in my office and bring it out and lend it to students when I can. But it's very slapdash in that way. Yeah. Yeah.
You grew up in New Jersey, and you said you went to New York University
Went to
for your.
NYU for a master's program. It was a joint program with NYU and the International Center of Photography, which that's the sort of the museum that was founded by the Magnum photographers way back in the day. And they have a school that they run as well. And they do some collaborations with a couple different universities around New York. So it was a 2-year long master's program there. Yeah.
What was that experience like?
Um, it was interesting. It was not the greatest program, I would say, at the time, in that it was very split. In that on the NYU side, it was a bunch of painters and very conceptual artists, and it was a very conversation driven side of it. And then on the ICP side, it was a very technical side. And I got something out of both of them, but it wasn't the most focused of programs in that way.
Hmm.
Probably the biggest influence for me was on the ICP side. I worked with a printer named Chuck Kelton, who's a black and white printer in New York, who's like he printed Larry Sultan's, no, not Larry Sultan, Larry Clark's Tulsa project and other things like that. So he's a really high-end printer, and he taught our class, and then I worked for him for about 9 months afterwards and got to be in the darkroom with him every day for long periods of time. So things like that were incredibly influential to my life, but the program itself was a little strange.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I would have thought that would have been a slam dunk as far as, the program that they put together.
Yeah. It was based out of their school of education. So it wasn't in the Tisch school. It was this sort of strange thing that I think might have been legacied in. It doesn't exist anymore.
Oh,
So it died maybe 6 or 7 years after I went there. Like that particular collaboration. I think they still have their own MFA program there, but the ICP part of it was ended at some point.
interesting.
Yeah.
Well, it's cool that you made this connection though with this master printer and, got to work with him for 9 months,
Yeah.
you said.
Chuck he's an amazing printer. He's he's lived in the darkroom for decades and he can do things in the darkroom that I don't understand. And I tried to learn as much as I could from him. I got to basically I spent a summer as the person who was washing prints, and that was amazing. I would be there until 9 o'clock at night, finishing up with all the print washing. And sometimes I get to actually go in and print with him and watch him work through his commercial projects or the art projects that he was doing. And yeah, it was pretty incredible to see what he could get out of a negative and how he could handle it. And then he introduced me to Vera Lutter, the black and white pinhole photographer who I worked for 3 years after that. He had helped her set up her darkroom, build a lab for her essentially in her studio. So with that, we were doing basically, by pinhole photographer, I mean it was camera obscura trailers or hotel rooms that we were using as cameras and then projecting onto multiple 56-inch wide sheets of paper to make these images that are like 200 inches by 100 inches tall, black and white negatives of whatever was outside the room that we were working in. Yeah. And so then we'd hand process those in long trays, just rolling them through giant baths of developer and stop and fixer and toning and other things like that.
Wow, crazy. What a great experience.
Yeah, it's pretty intense, that level of art making. Yeah. Did a lot of travel. We're in Venice for a lot with her, like using different hotels in Venice, or we spent 2 months once in a coal mine in Germany, using a shipping container as a camera and photographing these like giant, they're called like paddle coal mine machines that are essentially just like removing the earth, and they slowly creep along the ground like the thing from the Jawas in Star Wars, right, and just slowly level the mountains there. And we had one of those that was stationary, and we were photographing that for like a month and a half or 2 months, which was pretty surreal to be driving into a coal mine every day.
Yeah, I bet.
But,
and so when you're using like if in the hotel, like in Venice, you're blacking out the window, and then is it a lens, or do you use actually like a pinhole, like a pinhole camera?
She was using pinholes, pretty large pinholes, but pinholes nonetheless. I started doing some versions of that using color paper, and I started using lenses with those, like little eyeglass lenses, essentially, that would focus at very specific distances.
Okay.
Yeah, and I was making these color negatives out of those. Yeah. And
That's
the
crazy.
exposures for her would be like, they'd range from on the short side, 4 hours, to on the long side. Like at one point we built a camera inside the Dia Beacon in New York, and we're photographing like the internal structures of it. And those exposures were 3 months to 4 months long.
Oh my God. How do you even factor how long it's going to be? I mean, obviously there must be formulas, but good God.
It's trial and error, but also it's doubling and halving, right? So like
some math.
A direct exposure is 3 months. If you exposure for 6 months, that's one stop off. So yeah, the room for error is gigantic at that level in photography. Okay. And so for me, my stuff I was doing, the color stuff, I think my exposures on that were much faster since I was using a lens, but it was still like a correct exposure would still be like 10 minutes at times. And so if I was off by 3 minutes, it's okay. Plus it's a negative, so it looks weird and you can't really tell exactly how correct it is. Yeah.
Oh, that's interesting.
There's a lot of flexibility at that level.
Sounds like it.
What made you want to be a photographer? What got you into photography?
So as an undergrad, so I went to Princeton for undergrad, and I was going in there to be a writer and to be an English major. And my junior year there, I took their intro black and white photo class, which was taught by Emmet Gowin. And 100% that's what turned me into a photographer. Emmet Gowin is a deeply inspirational, spiritual, just sort of wonderful human being that can make anyone excited. Yeah, anyone excited with the idea of photography. And his work is incredible. So after one semester with him, I was hooked, and I took photo classes for the rest of my time there, and then went to grad school. Yeah. So
amazing.
Pretty simple. This photograph that I have pulled up, I've read, is kind of the photograph that kind of really hooked you, that you were like, all right, this is what I want to do. Talk about this photograph and what it means to you.
Yeah. There were a lot of things going on with this. So he was making these, I think, right before I took classes with him. So we were starting to see them right around that time. He had transitioned from his family projects, so he was photographing his immediate family, sort of the prototype for what Sally Mann did later on. And then he transitioned to these aerial images. I mean, the first time I saw them, they're just stunningly beautiful in person. His printing is incredible, like the tones in them. He also tones them. So there's like these really subtle colors throughout all these images. And it hadn't really occurred to me that black and white images didn't have to be black and white, that they could have color values in them. So I was learning about that at the time. But it was just like the giantness and the tininess of them at the same time, I think sort of blew me away. These places that I'll probably never see. So he's photographing the atomic bomb test sites in Nevada, and he would like hire airplanes to fly him over them and photograph out the window of these little airplanes that he had. And just that incredible, rich, dark values and dark tones, the shadows coming across there, and just, yeah, the abstraction of it too. Taking this thing that's terrible and turning into something that's absolutely gorgeous and absolutely amazing. And that weird dichotomy has always been really interesting to me in art, like how you can take these scars on the world and turn them into beautiful objects for us to look at. But that's also like the only way you can get us to look at them and think about them is by turning them into beautiful objects. And so it's this weird little circle going on right there. Yeah, just everything about them blew me away when I first saw them. It was an incredible experience. Yeah.
And the photograph that we're talking about, actually, I found this particular photograph that was referenced by Bailey in another article, but this was actually in the New Yorker, and it's Seddon crater. Is that how you pronounce it? Seddon?
Yeah, that seems right.
Seddon crater with helicopter shadow looking east, Area 10, Nevada test site, 1996. And it is a really cool photograph.
Yeah. It's just one giant crater almost filling the whole image. And half of it is in intense shadow, like really strong raking light coming across them. Yeah. Yeah, if you ever have an hour to kill, he has a couple lectures online where he talks about these, and they're wonderful watches. He's a very spiritual and just soft-spoken and lovely person to listen to, and they're worth spending some time with him and talking and listening to him talk about the experience of making these images.
Amazing.
You talked about some of the jobs, some of the work you did after graduation. When you went to Seattle, and obviously this was after you had worked with Vera on some of her projects, you started doing some of these big room camera obscuras. Let's talk a little bit about that work.
Yeah, I love the experience of being in the camera. So being inside of these is very different than what you expect. So you black out all the windows, and then you put this little pinhole in it, and then the world appears upside down and backwards to you. So you have this. And one of the biggest surprises for me when I think I'd been working for Vera for a tiny bit, like maybe a month, and I'd seen a lot of her images, but we hadn't had a shoot yet. So I hadn't been in one of these cameras. And then the first time I went into the camera, I looked at the image, was like, wait, it's in color. Because all of our images are black and white. And it just didn't occur to me that you would see the world projected in color on these things with like this intense blue sky down at your feet and then the road up at your head because everything's upside down. And yeah, you just sort of can sit in there, and as your eyes slowly adjust, you slowly start to see an image, and you see people like walking across the ceiling. You see cars driving across the ceiling. You see the clouds moving on the floor below you. And it's just this really contemplative and sort of meditative experience to sit in there. And so I was looking for, in Seattle, this is actually in Princeton, New Jersey. This is from my parents' house at the time that was looking across part of the campus of the university. It's a tower up at the graduate school of Princeton. But I was looking in Seattle for basically rooms that I could take over that had interesting views. And so it'd always be the sort of the weird conversation if I met someone and we're talking and find out where they live. And it's like, ooh, do you have a bedroom that has a nice view? Can I steal your bedroom for a day? Because to do it, it would be a very iterative process. I mean, I'm doing multiple things that don't really work very well in that I have this giant camera. the lens is very small, the opening, the distance from the lens to the paper is very far. So my aperture numbers were like 800 frequently, 800 or 900. And then I'm exposing onto paper, color paper, which maybe has a speed of ISO like 6, maybe. But to make it more complicated, if you just expose directly onto color photo paper, you get an image that's red on red, because color photo paper has this huge bias in it, in that color negatives are obviously this sort of orangey red color. Color negatives have this base layer to them that's orange, and the paper is designed to counterbalance that. So it has this sort of other way of like it's expecting orange light to hit it, and then it will come out neutral, but the world is much more blue. Light from outside is much clearer and bluer. So as a result, it pushes everything to a massive orange or red tone. So in order to balance that, I'd have to use filters. So on top of a crazy ISO and a crazy aperture, I was just putting these random filters in front of it. And there weren't really like any filters that really worked perfectly. So it'd be a combination of multiple filters. So the long short of that is that in essence, I was just guessing with my exposures. I had no idea what I was doing. And the only reason I was able to ever start working in this medium is that one day in New York City, I saw an advertisement on Craigslist that there was a color lab that was going out of business, and they were selling all their stuff. And so I was curious, and I went down there, and they had rolls and rolls of color photo paper. And it's like, I think they were asking for like $50 for a roll of paper. And so I bought a roll of paper and I took it home. And then I was sitting there and I thought, wait, what am I doing? And I went back to them and I offered them, I think, $400 for like 20 rolls of paper. And they gave it all to me. And I put it into a cab and took it home with me. And so I had all this color paper that I could just burn through essentially and learn how to do this with. And so I was just like making exposures, failing over and over and over again, like coming up with a black image, a white image, a bright orange image, because the feedback loop is also particularly long, because to make these images, I'm in a dark room. I have a little pinhole. I have my screen that I've built, and I hang the paper on the screen and I take my image, but then I have to roll it up into a tube. And in New York City, then I have to get on the subway, take the subway down to whatever the lab I was using, go to the lab, pay them to let them go into their processor and just feed the paper through the processor, and then take the subway back up to wherever my apartment that I was using was. So it would be like this 3-hour turnaround between one exposure and the next exposure. And so I'd have to spend a couple of days doing this. So my goal was always to I'd have this room, I'd make like 4 exposures on medium-sized paper at different amounts and different values. And then I'd take those, process them, and then I'd come back and be like, all right, this is right. And then I'd make like 10 exposures with, some slight changes throughout them, just to try to make sure I was covering it and getting what I needed, because people didn't want to give me their room for like a week. I would have it for a day at most. Because it's not pleasant I turned my bedroom into a camera for like a couple months once, and it was always like deeply creepy bringing friends over, because the windows would all be blacked and I'd have this like weird screen up above my bed, and it really looked like I was a serial killer. So I had to be a little careful about that, especially rough for the dating life. So but eventually I got better and better at like nailing down slightly more precise exposures and getting more accurate ideas.
Yeah. How much, obviously there's a huge learning curve there. How long did it take you to get to a point where you felt pretty comfortable with what you were doing based on your experience? There's so many different factors involved, I would imagine, with this particular process.
Yeah, I would get comfortable and then something would change, right? My emulsion would change. I'd move to a new roll of paper and suddenly everything would be different.
Wow.
Because I'm not buying my paper. I had rolls and rolls, and some of it was Kodak and some was Fuji and some was, super glossy, weird Kodak paper. There was a lot of different things. Some of it was probably 10 years old and some of it was only 2 years old. So I really did feel that I always had to figure it out on the first exposures, and I was very rarely right. So I would, I'd take whatever I did last time and be like, all right, meter reading outside says it's, roughly in this ballpark. But maybe if I was facing north instead of south, that would change a lot. Or if it was a cloudy day versus a intense sunny day, that would change a lot. So no, my answer would be no. I never really. I never had it dialed in so I could just walk into a place and make an image. There was always a feedback loop on that.
I would imagine that, part of this process, you learned some of this too from working with that other photographer, right? Like you incorporated some of the things that she was doing with her process into your process, even though the situation changes from space to space. And again, you're dealing, and that's something that people would not think about unless you've actually done this before. You have a good foundation with film processing or the darkroom, right?
Mhm.
Like even with films, from emulsion to emulsion, it changes.
Mhm.
But even when you buy, like, okay, you could still buy, say, medium format film today,
Mhm.
though the choices are a bit more limited than what they used to be.
Yeah.
But you buy, a 5 pack of medium format film. Just because it says on the package that it's T-Max or a Tri-X 400 doesn't mean that that's the true speed of the film.
Yeah.
And if you're really anal, back in the day, photographers would actually test their film to ensure that they are getting, or, so that they know the actual true speed of the film. I would assume that there's some of that with this photo paper. Again, you're talking different manufacturers, but
Yeah.
also different types of paper, and even with the same manufacturer, that it could vary from roll to roll.
Yeah. I would say my problem was that there were a couple more variables. Like the filters in particular was a very confounding variable in that I would change them probably more than I had to, but I'd also like things would just stop. I think they would interact with the color of the light outside in a way that I wasn't prepared to factor in, essentially. So there were things going on that I just couldn't get a handle on a lot of the time. When I moved to Wyoming and I built a trailer camera and I started working in black and white here, and that I was buying the paper and I had more control over it, and I was able to be a little more rigorous with that world because I was in control of what papers and I was being a little more limited with it. There, interestingly, I did some positives using that Harman positive paper. Have you guys ever used that?
Mm-mm.
I have not.
And so Harman started making this direct positive, like a reversal positive paper in black and white about 10 years ago, maybe 15 years ago. And it's a really magical paper in that you process it with normal black and white chemicals. And if you underexpose it radically, it comes out white. And if you overexpose it radically, it comes out white. And if you get it right in the middle, it makes an image. And
Okay.
I've talked to the Harman reps at conferences, and they're just like, no, we can't tell you how we do it. So it's some sort of weird, like they've flashed the paper in this way, and like somehow it reacts with the chemicals in this little sweet zone in the middle. Anyway, it's also like deeply experimental. And so like I'd buy a batch of paper, it's very expensive, and I'd start using it. And then suddenly I realized that no, this one has an ISO of 40, whereas the last one had an ISO of 6. And it's just like, so that I would, yeah, figure out tests and do all that sort of stuff with it. Because it was also much higher stakes. It was that paper is so incredibly expensive. But yeah, it was magic. That paper. Don't really know how it worked. It-
Well, in general, when you're talking about these, film and paper processes, right? It's always magic because you never know it's not like digital where you get instant feedback and you know whether you're going in the right direction, you're underexposed, overexposed, whatever, instantaneously. This is a process, and there's a lot of hit or miss. And when it works, you're like over the moon. And when it doesn't, you're like, oh, geez, gosh darn it,
yeah.
start back from square one again, or,
Yeah.
start over. So it can
Mhm.
be, I'd imagine, kind of frustrating. I've been there, but not on this level of what you're doing.
Yeah.
Um,
Oh no, it's frustrating, but it's fun because you're always learning. You're
yeah,
always having to troubleshoot and having to figure out. It's frustrating when it fails for an entire summer. Like I think I was telling you about the cyanotypes on glass. They just stopped working last summer because they turned off the heat in my building, and I didn't realize it for a full month that it was too cold and there's too much humidity, and they stopped working completely. So I had 3 months of complete fail on that. So that's frustrating. But when you can, actually solve the problem. In that case, I couldn't solve it because I couldn't turn the heat back on. I just had to wait for that.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
So what does it say about you that you can, like, you have this patience in this tenacity to work in this field where everything is so, like, it works and then it doesn't work. And then you're trying to figure, like, I don't think I could do it. So what is it about you that allows you to do that?
I love the process. And I sort of, if I'm asked what is interesting to me in photography, for me, it's a question about process and content. It's, for me, the most interesting projects are ones where how I make the thing has a relationship to what I'm looking at. So the content has some relationship to the process of it. And so it becomes that question of, like, I don't want just like a default, like I'm just going to take pictures with this camera because that's what I always do. I want to have part of my discussion with my mind about, I'm interested in this subject. I want to go photograph this type of power plant. Now, what's the best version of that? What's the most interesting way where you can, learn about how it's made, and that can have something additive that can bring something to the discussion, bring something to the conversation about the content of this thing. Yeah, I think it's also, I'm very restless too. You're going way back to talking about teaching. Like, I'm the only one here, and that's good and bad. But also, I realize fully that, like, I'm pretty good at a lot of stuff, and I'm not actually really good at anything in photography. Like, I'm not a great photographer in any specific way, but I'm really interested in lots of different things, and I can teach lots of different things, and I can play around with lots of different ways of making images or different vocabularies of even digital photography, but none of them I'm an expert at in the slightest.
Right, right.
Yeah.
When you learn something, do you move on? Like, are you always just in this progressive of moving on, or do you come back to it? Like, I'm working on this project now, I'm going to use this process I learned 10 years ago and do it that way.
A little bit. I mean, maybe the best example of holding something is the current work that I have up in Denver, which is cyanotypes on glass. So they're attached to the glass, and then they're backed with gold leaf. And the thing that I held on to was, about 25 years ago, I saw a show in New York City of a photographer who printed on wood that had gold leaf on it, and then the images were printed onto the gold leaf. So it was these, like, really beautiful, they looked like Russian icons almost, but they were photographs. And that was in my mind for decades. And I started playing around with that a while ago. So it wasn't that I learned the process, but it was that, like, this was sort of the thing that was driving it. And then I finally found a way to use it with this most recent project. I was able to actually realize this thing that I've been thinking about off and on for a long time. So yeah. But I do drop processes. I did a whole lot of wet plate back about 6 years ago, and I don't know if I'm going to do that again. It's so laborious and so chemical in a lot of ways. Like, there's just a lot of stuff that you have to deal with that is a little toxic and a little not pleasant to deal with. But I mean, I took a wet plate darkroom for, I think, a total of like a month and a half rafting the Colorado River in 2018 and 2019 over 2 trips. I took a wet plate darkroom through the Grand Canyon, and that was like a great way to end my job of wet plate. And I am done.
Yeah, because that's no joke. I mean, I admire the people, and I love some of the photographs I see of people that do wet plate, like landscapes,
Yeah.
But the portable dark room is cool, but at the same time you're dealing with all those chemicals. And then it's one thing to have them in a studio where you have control of temperature, and then you're trying to control that in outside. That just, like, makes my brain hurt. So
yeah, I mean, we were in the Grand Canyon in July, late July,
Oh my
And I
God.
was legitimately concerned that my ether was going to blow up because it was 110 degrees and ether
Oh,
sublimates at like 120 or something like that. So I had it like, I had all my collodion packed in these tiny little glass bottles about this big, like 15 or 20 tiny little bottles, with the idea being that there was just so much glass that it was going to keep it from exploding. And it was fine in the end. I mean, they did
wow.
that 150 years ago. So, and
Right.
they didn't blow up too much that I know of. But no, there was a moment on the river on a super hot day. I remember when I had my darkroom set up on the side of the river, and there was this waterfall that was like maybe maybe 300 meters up a canyon away from me. And wet plate has this time where it's like from the moment you pull the plate out of the silver, you have about 10 minutes to get it into the developer or it starts to peel. And so I sort of timed it out that I could pull my plate out, jog up to my camera, take a picture, jog back to it. And I'd be at like 8 minutes when that happened and get it into the developer. And so the first time I did it, I was too slow and it was all cracked by the time I got. So I went like hardcore fast, which meant that I was like breathing incredibly heavily as I stuck my head into this darkroom. And the darkrooms work by they're this box essentially, and then you have a huge cloth and you wrap yourself around in the cloth and stick yourself into it. And inside the darkroom are these trays of chemicals. And so I like hyperventilating, stick my head into this box of chemistry that's fuming out of it, and proceeded to come really close to passing out
Wow.
before I could process the image. It's like, that's not a great idea. I think it's time to try something a little more safe
Right. Right.
for photography. Yeah.
That's
So,
crazy.
and I never got the image too. It was a total fail.
Oh my God. That sucks.
It was just a little too far away to work. Yeah.
But when you nail it, man, you're on top of the world.
The first time, like both river trips, the first day that my images worked, it just felt, it was incredible. Like got to pull it up and have this like gorgeous 8x10 piece of metal that I could immediately show to the other people who were on the rafting trip with me. And just, yeah, and they're just beautiful when they're, wet and shiny and all that coming out of the chemicals. Yeah.
So talk about these trips that you did, why you did them, and how they all came about.
Yeah, so it was a project called SCREE, which is the Sesquicentennial Colorado River Exploratory Expedition. So 150 years ago in 2019, so that would be in 1869, 1879, 1869. Powell did the first like white expedition down the Colorado River, essentially. So they kicked off from Green River, Wyoming, and they rafted all the way down into central Arizona with some problems. I think at some point during their trip, they decided they were stuck, and a bunch of his people hiked out and were immediately killed by possibly some Mormon settlers outside the canyon. They're not really sure what happened to them, but most of them got through. And this was that first like seeing what the Colorado River did. And then the next year, he organized a larger trip, and that trip sort of took place over 2 years, where he had a photographer on the trip, whose name I'm blanking at the moment, J.K. Hillers. He was actually a boatman who learned how to be a wet plate photographer while he was on the Colorado River, because the photographer they'd actually hired decided it was way too hardcore and bailed out after a couple months or so. And so on the 150th anniversary of this, a professor at the University of Wyoming organized this expedition, symposium, art project, just this really large thing, essentially, that we called SCREE, which was partially, it was sort of a academic reassessment of Powell's legacy. So Powell went from doing this to founding the USGS, US Geological Survey, and a lot of his writings are pretty seminal in terms of deciding how water would be dealt with in the West. And he had a totally maximalist point of view in that we should use all the water. Like it should be used by us, and the river should be dry by the time it hits the ocean. And that's how it is. I mean, the Colorado River doesn't hit the ocean now. So it's pretty much his legacy is what the Colorado River right now is. It wasn't like a celebration of him, but it was more an assessment. Like, what is his legacy? how has he affected things, and what can we learn from looking back at him? And so the project had a whole bunch of different parts. One part of it was a book with a whole lot of articles by academics looking at different aspects of Powell and the river. One part was a series of art shows. A painter named Pat Keycut, who's based out of New Mexico now, but he used to be a professor in our department. He organized the art side of it, and we had a series of shows in small towns along the Colorado River that were taking place while we were doing the third part, which was the rafting trip. And so the rafting trip was a full 3-month-long trip, started up in Green River, Wyoming, and ended down in the middle of Lake Mead, I believe, Lake Powell, whichever this one is south of the Grand Canyon. And for that trip, we got USGS involved. And so they basically cycled people into it. And so in that 3-month period, I think about 95 different people cycled onto the boats at different times. I was only on the boat for that trip for like the first 2 weeks of that. I went through from Wyoming through Dinosaur National Monument, and then I got out in Vernal, Utah. But as preparation for that trip, the same leader, Tom, who organized this whole thing, and Pat and a couple of the other people, we all rafted the Grand Canyon the summer before. And for me, that was like a chance to make images that were going to go in the art shows, essentially. So it was sort of like my pre-scree event was to go that and raft that and do the images there. And then I brought the same camera and the same gear onto the first 2 weeks of the full scree trip. 3 people, I think, did the entire trip, and then everyone else sort of cycled out throughout the entire time. So Pat, the painter, came out of the trip looking pretty feral and unkempt with a giant beard after living on the water for 3.5 months. He was a different man afterwards. But it was an incredible experience. I mean, we on the river, have you guys rafted much?
A little bit.
It's slow. It's such a different experience because you're just sitting there, and maybe you go through a rapid and then you just get to camp and you set up camp and you just hang out. And so we were doing podcasts where we'd interview like people that we brought in. So at like different times, like some of the higher up people at USGS or the people involved with like actual water negotiations would come in and they'd hang out, and there'd be these little interviews and discussions. And there was a movie that was made of it. There's some clips of it on the Scree website still. And and then artists who were coming in and out of it at different times. Yeah.
That's pretty cool. Were you the only photographer?
We had a guy named Will Wilson. He's a Navajo photographer out of northern Arizona. He also does wet plate as well, but I think he was doing something else when he joined. I think he rafted the Grand Canyon, during that part, so I didn't actually get to meet him. I think he was the only other photographer. There was a digital filmmaker who also did some photography as well. But yeah, otherwise the main artists were Pat, who's a painter. There was a graphic designer who was doing these sort of data-driven things. And then there was a sculptor named Dave Jones and a couple other artists whose names I'm not remembering too much. Because it was such a long trip, I only interacted with the people who I was on the trip with.
Right.
Sure.
Emailed some others, but yeah.
We've talked about wet plate collodion before on the podcast, but take a moment, because if you haven't listened to one of our previous episodes, take a moment and explain that process so people can wrap their heads around it. You kind of touched on it a little bit, how complicated it is, but if you could just kind of spell out the steps that it takes to do this.
Definitely. So wet plate was cutting edge technology in the 1860s. So it came off of like daguerreotypes, were sort of the first version of photography. And then wet plate, I think, was really basically the second version of photography, the second like big generational change. It is a wet process, as it says. So the thing that came after wet plate was, not surprisingly, dry plate, which was a much more stable and functional and transportable process. But it's a wet process where you either are working on glass or metal. If it's metal, it's like blackened metal. So nowadays we use essentially the metal from like plaques. If you get a plaque or a trophy, it's sort of that type of metal is what you use. It's a tin of some sort called a tin type as well, though I think now it's aluminum probably, whatever. But You have to have your darkroom with you, and essentially you take your plate and you pour collodion onto the plate. And collodion is this like slightly viscous liquid. I believe it's like a byproduct of making TNT, possibly. It's like you basically take like cotton and you soak it in sulfuric acid, and it's super toxic to make in that way. And then there's a lot of ether involved as well, alcohol, ether alcohol. And it's a very viscous, sort of sticky, tacky substance. They also used it during Civil War as a bandage. So if you have a cut, you can paint collodion on your cut essentially to stop the bleeding that way. So you pour the collodion on. That's, you're standing there holding this little plate, trying to pour the perfect amount of collodion onto it. And then you drip off the collodion that you don't want. And then you take that and you put it into a bath of silver nitrate. In the field, you tend to have these like boxes of silver nitrate that are entirely like a wooden box with a little lid on the top. And you sort of slide it on a little spatula down into that. And it sits in the silver nitrate for a period of time between 2 minutes to like 8 minutes, depending on how strong your silver nitrate is. From the moment you pull it out of the silver nitrate, it's light sensitive. So you have to do that in the dark, and you essentially like stick the spatula in. And so in the field, I would have this box, like a giant cardboard box, or I was actually using a grow tent in the field. So essentially what you would use to grow pot in your basement at home. So I had a little grow tent that I'd modified. It cut out some windows in it and put red gel essentially on the windows because wet plate is not red light sensitive. It's only sensitive to blue light. So you can have filtered red light coming in, and that's not a problem to it. So you'd stick yourself into this thing, you'd wrap, yep, that's a picture of my darkroom there. That's actually the one where I was hyperventilating in. Lovely darkroom. And you wrap yourself in this giant cloth so that you can like stick your whole head in there and pull this plate out of the silver bath and put it into a 8x10 film holder. It's like a slightly modified version, not a normal film holder. You basically have to cut out the middle of the film holder and then place it into it that way. And then you put it into the film holder, and then from the moment it comes out of the silver, you have less than 10 minutes to get it back into the developer. So you put it into the holder, take it to your camera, put it in your camera, make an image. It has an ISO of like maybe 10, maybe 12. It's a little faster than paper, but much slower than film. So exposure times tend to be pretty long. If you're doing a portrait, you're looking at like 30-second exposures sometimes. Most of my exposures in the Canyon would be 5 to 10 seconds to get an image that way if I was shooting moderately wide open. And then you rush it back and it goes into developer, just a little bit of developer in a tray, and then it goes into fixer. And fixer can be two different types of fixer. You can use like a pretty normal generic photo fixer, or you can use a deeply toxic cyanide-based fixer that I never recommend anyone to use. Apparently it gives it creamier whites, but it also will kill you. So I don't do that. So I just use the normal fixer for that. And then you have to wash it, and then you have a stable image. It creates a negative, which is sort of interesting. So if you're doing it on glass, you have a negative, and the negative has light, like dense white tones where the blacks would be in a normal negative, but it's transparent where the darks would be. And then, or you can do it onto a sheet of black metal, and then the white tones become the positive. So it can be both a negative and a positive at the same time, which is sort of interesting. So people make either glass plate negatives out of it. They make ambrotypes out of it, which are glass plate negatives that have something black behind them. So if you just stick a black sheet or paint them black, it turns into a positive. Or you do tintypes. For the Canyon, I did tintypes. I was not being period specific there, period accurate, because Hillers did glass. He was shooting like 11x14 sheets of glass that he took on the Grand Canyon. I think at some point I read he had like a ton, literally 1 metric ton of supplies that he was carrying with him.
Wow.
And that's just crazy. I don't want to do that. So I shot with tin. Tin weighs almost nothing. And so I could just have a giant pile of tin with me. And that was a much better system. It's also much easier to make it stick. It's really hard to clean the glass well enough to make good images. You have to be really fastidious, and that doesn't really lend itself to being in the middle of the Grand Canyon. Being fastidious.
Absolutely. Yeah.
It's a unique object. So they're unreproducible. They're unique tintypes, and they look sort of amazing. You can scan them, but yeah, it's this physical thing is there as soon as you're done, which I find really fun. Yeah.
And you were shooting these images with a 8x10 view camera?
Yep, I had an Intrepid 8x10, which are those British like super lightweight. Yeah, this guy, they're really nice cameras. Those are pretty new. It's like the only modern cameras that people like film cameras people make nowadays.
Mm.
Yeah, I think there's a couple other 8x10 producers, but yeah, they make these. I mean, they're lightweight, they're a little flimsy. You have to be a little gentle with them, but they weigh almost nothing and they pack down really small. So it was a great camera to have for this project.
Are they pretty expensive?
No, they're really cheap compared.
Okay.
I mean, the camera itself is maybe $700,
Okay.
$800. So I had a grant for that. And then the lenses, yeah, the lenses cost money. So I was able
Yeah.
to find some lenses on eBay. I think I had a big lens and a small lens essentially for the project.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you produce some really beautiful imagery. I'm going to pull up one right now. This is one of my favorites. This is Grand Canyon
Yeah.
13. This is a really yummy, is how I would explain it, image.
Yeah.
Talk a little bit about this, if you would.
Yeah. It's so enticing when you're making images that have really long exposures to just want to photograph water at all times
Mhm.
because it's just beautiful no matter what you do with it. The water just evens out and you get these really soft tones coming across it. So yeah, I just found myself photographing the river over and over again. But for this one, I mean, I would call looking at this like my immediate reaction would be that it's underexposed, but that's fine. It's moody as a result of that darkness around the sides of it. Get very so it's a landscape. It has some rocks in the foreground. It's a vertical landscape. The river stretches out in front of you, and then there's tall cliffs on both sides and tall cliffs in the distance. It's one of the more open parts of the river. I don't exactly remember. I think this is on the lower part of the river, probably. Yeah, I think we're near that spot where you climb up to see the old ruins up on a cliff face, and I'm blanking on the name of that right now.
Mhm.
But it's in one of the more open areas down there where the walls aren't just towering right over your head, where there's more light coming down from above. And another aspect of wet plate is that it's blue light sensitive, so the sky is always overexposed. You can't really get clouds with them as a result. So you have these like deep, dark, creamy white tones, deep light, creamy white tones in the sky that are just a really particular look to this type of process. And especially the exposures were sort of strange because all the dirt is red. And so red doesn't really expose very well. It tends to be pretty underexposed. And so I'd always have to compensate for that in weird different ways. But yeah, this is one of my favorites in that it's just a very calm and peaceful image of the river, which
It
is
is.
experience that I had there. Yeah.
I love the moodiness of it. And I think you said it was underexposed. You shouldn't have said that, man.
Yeah.
But but anyway, it's a lovely image. I love the feel of it. And it actually the tones are fantastic. It's got great contrast and you can see all this detail in here.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love it. And even the sky, and I didn't realize that you never really capture the clouds, but that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, it really works with this image and it's spectacular.
Yeah.
Thanks.
I
Yeah, I
love
always
that.
love to show in class when we're looking at through art history. If you've ever seen the Gustave Le Gray photos, he was an early French photographer, and he showed these ocean landscapes at whatever the salons were way back in the day, and people's minds were blown by them because he had made these images that had beautifully exposed ocean and beautifully exposed clouds above it. And everyone's like, how in the world did he do that? Are you a magician? What in the world did he do? Did you invent a new process? No, he took two negatives and he chopped them in half and combined them together. He was just really smart.
Yeah.
And he did it in this perfectly seamless way. And it was the first composite image essentially. And he was able to bring this moody, like incredible clouds into a landscape, and it worked. It
Huh.
was lovely. But yeah, that's always something to think about here, and that it tends to make everything look overexposed. I mean, look overcast because of the whiteness on top. Yeah.
For me, it has that feel of, at the end of the day, as the sun is already gone over the canyon walls or whatever,
Mm.
right? And
Yeah.
it's starting to become, it's a little after sunset. We've lost all that light, but yeah, it's really nice.
Thank you.
Makes me want to go camping.
I mean, the Grand Canyon is incredible. If you ever have an opportunity, jump on it to raft the Grand Canyon. It's a different experience. I'm Bailey Russell, and you're listening to the Tenet podcast.
And then you shot some portraits while you're
Yeah.
in the canyon and doing this trip. I really
Yeah.
love this portrait of this guy. I mean, this could be yesterday or it could be 100+ years ago.
Yeah, that's the beauty of them. They don't do kind things to women.
Right.
They're not flattering photos ever. I've never been accused of taking a flattering wet plate photo. But yeah, they have this rugged feeling to them. And this guy actually, this was on the first trip, and he's got an amazing name. This is Bronze Black, is his name.
Oh.
And he is a professional river rafting guide, a phenomenal guide and rower. But he was along on the trip for fun, just to do the Grand Canyon as a fun person as opposed to as a job. And I think before this, he had rafted the Grand Canyon like 75 times or something crazy like that.
Wow.
So spent, years of his life in the Grand Canyon. But yeah, it gives this like weathered and rugged look to it. And then on the top those are sort of artifacts from the process. I think from too much silver in the process, and you get these sort of weird squiggles and other things going on. These strange artifacts in the image.
They kind of burn off sometimes. I've seen like it looks like a trail where they kind of look like they burn off or whatever. It's really cool
little
looking.
comets they call them.
Yeah.
Different ways. Yeah. I think there's another one of these portraits that I always think about as my like Mormon elder portrait. It's the darkest one. If you go out now,
And that one we were just looking at was Grand Canyon 021. This one that we're talking about is Grand Canyon 061.
Yeah. This guy is I forget his name, but he's a geologist out of University of Utah. Great scientist, but this just makes him look like a Mormon elder, I feel.
It does. It again, another really great portrait. The only thing that gives it away is the damn logo on his shirt. I was looking at this and I was like, oh man, I love this portrait of this dude. Like, it's fantastic. And again, it could be taken 100+ years ago, just like you were saying. But then I saw this little logo on his shirt.
Yeah.
I shouldn't have mentioned it because everybody, oh, there
it is.
There it is. But yeah. And the digital world that we live in now, I'm like, oh, I could fix that in 2 seconds. But
yeah, at least it's backwards, because that's the other thing. So all of these images are backwards. So if there's any text, it's always spelled backwards on them, which is nice. Since because
your eye is always going to go to some text if there's words or letters or whatever in the photograph. But yeah, the fact that it's backwards, it's not as noticeable. It's a great portrait.
Yeah. And the fun thing taking these is I think these were like 12-second exposures, maybe 15-second exposures. So having to talk to them and it's like, all right, you got to sit perfectly still. We're gonna take deep breaths and we're gonna relax. And it's this sort of meditative process for them. They have to like really calm down to be able to successfully sit for these images.
Yeah.
That's one of the beautiful things about this whole process, right? This adds a whole different level in doing a portrait. It's one thing when you're photographing a person with a view camera, because that in itself is a slow process. But then the process of doing all this as well, as far as because it is so slow, right? And you're not using, you're using the ambient available light, natural light. There's no lights involved. So these long exposures really kind of, like you say, make it kind of meditative.
I mean, even more than that, I would have to, sit them down, focus the camera, frame it up, and then go pour my plate and silver it, and then come back with the camera. So it's like, you got to stay still while I'm doing all these other things too, because I have to be ready to go as soon as it comes out of the silver. I can't wait around at that point and refocus and all that sort of stuff. So
yeah, you're like, dude, I'm going to go pour this. When I get back, you got to be in that chair.
Gonna
Don't be
be
getting up
aimless.
and getting a beer out of the cooler.
Right.
I think probably most of these guys had a beer down on their hand. I'm sure, hidden out of the way. Yeah, that was that's the other thing you do on the river. Yeah,
Yeah, what a great project, and
thank you.
what a great experience that you got to be a part of this.
Thanks.
So there's one that I like, and
Okay.
so if you go, it's called Tree and Mountains. That one right
Oh yeah,
there.
this one.
I
Yeah.
love that. And so what makes the tint of the change of the color?
Yeah, so they tend to have a creamy tone to them.
Okay.
If I'd used that cyanide, it would have an even creamier tone.
Mm,
But no, tends to come out, the whites tend to come out a little creamy, especially
okay.
on the positives. You don't notice it with glass plate. If I'd shot glass, then I would have scanned it and I probably would have it would have inverted at that point. So you wouldn't see this. It would go to just a pure black.
Okay.
But there is a warmth to the wet plate, to the collodion always. And so a little bit of it is like the post-production. I decide how much of that warmth to keep, because the warmth balances. If you look down in the bottom left corner of this image,
Uh-huh.
there's that's a pore mark
Yep.
essentially. So coming in the bottom left are these like two streaks heading to the corner, and that's where I poured off the collodion on that corner. And so what happened there is the collodion got thick essentially.
Mm,
It was a lot thicker. There's more silver inside of it. And then when I develop it, it doesn't develop all the way through and it turns blue as a result of that. So you have
right.
this like blue to this yellow, the cream sort of balancing each other off.
Right.
And when I do the scans, I sort of decide just to push it one way or the other a little bit, sort of try to like, basically it's like white balance. I'm balancing it for one versus the other,
Right.
essentially. But I
Right.
think the original on this one did have this creamy feel to it. Yeah.
Okay. I love that creamy feel. That color is just
Yeah.
wonderful. I love the composition is amazing. And I love that bare tree in the center.
Yeah.
It just does it for me. The thing I like about like collodion work is the imperfections. I love that. You know, we're so used to having perfectly sharp images, edge to edge. Everything is tack sharp. I love the old process where there's just artifacts,
Yeah.
all over. So.
Yeah, and it usually they can add. Sometimes they're a problem, but sometimes they can complement it in wonderful ways. Yeah,
Right.
this was a campground in Dinosaur National Monument, and I think when we pulled in there, like one of the first things I saw was that tree. I was like, I need to do something. It was this huge lightning struck tree just sort of standing by itself out in the field, and it was so striking that I needed to figure out how to make a composition with it. I want to say I did this the next morning. Usually I set up in the afternoon, but I think I did it the next morning because in the afternoon the right side was entirely in shadow, and so there wasn't any way to get the details on that right side. It would have just been this huge black wall essentially,
Right.
and I had to wait for that to happen. But yeah, you talking like digital, I was photographing digitally as well at the same time, shooting regularly. I'd photograph a lot. I had thousands of images coming out of this. With wet plate, I was only like I made myself a rule, which is that I would only set up the darkroom every other day because it was exhausting. And when I set up the darkroom, I would take at most 5 pictures,
Okay.
and that would be about 3 hours worth of work.
Wow.
And then I'd just be
Dang.
destroyed after that. So you had to pace yourself, and you had to make sure you were right, that it was
You have
worth
to be
it.
very intentional.
Yeah, incredibly intentional. Had to be worth it to
Yeah.
pull it out. Yeah.
Well, this is a beautiful piece. I love this one a lot.
Thank you.
Were there days, and you said that you tried to pace yourself by, mixing it up, every other day or whatever. Were there days where you did actually back-to-back days? And were there times too where you knew you should be doing some of this work, but you're like, motherfucker, I really don't want to have to set up
Yeah,
this whole dark room today.
yeah. I mean, definitely on the Grand Canyon, since that has the real rapids, there were days that it was actually exhausting. Like you weren't just sitting on your thing, you were soaking wet and tired after like 7 hours of running one rapid after another. And on those days, just like, nope, that's not happening.
Yeah.
Even if I've got this incredible view across the way. I know that I sometimes do projects photographing at night or photographing in the middle of the winter. And I'm fully aware that when I do something like that, I mess up a lot. I make a lot of mistakes. And I'll realize like I get home, it's like, oh, my SD card was corrupted, or, oh, I forgot to bring this lens with me, or I just like my exposures were totally wrong on this entire set of thing when I'm tired. And I realized that. And so I had to be very aware of that even if there was something I really wanted to do, if I wasn't going to be focused, I couldn't do it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's just knowing yourself,
Yeah.
right? Like
Yeah.
knowing your process and knowing how you operate. I
Yeah.
mean, that's every photographer, I feel like, we all have our little quirks and, you forget stuff or,
Yeah.
you get sidetracked for one moment and you're like, doggone it. I didn't
Yeah.
throw that other lens from the other bag in that case or, whatever it is, right?
Mm, yeah. And the stakes are a little higher in this case. So you got to be just that little bit more careful, a little more aware of that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
I do want to backtrack because we moved on to this work and it's so compelling. I definitely wanted to talk about it. But what I do want to do is go back to when you were doing the big camera obscura room work. For people that don't or aren't photographers, and we have plenty of people that are photographers that listen to this podcast, but they may not know what a camera obscura is. Talk about what a camera obscura is, the history of it, and a little bit more about how you were using it, because I have a couple more questions I'd like to ask you about it.
Definitely. Yeah. So camera obscura is a very old concept. I mean, they knew, I want to say it was like 8th century Chinese philosopher came up with it. There's something very old in China with it and in the Middle East as well, in which they realized that if you controlled the light in a certain way, you could project an image. So in its simplest way, if you're in a dark room and there's a little hole in one of the walls, it will project an image. It will project an image upside down and backwards onto the other side of the room. It's just essentially, if you think about it like as triangles, the light's coming in from an angle and it's going through this tiny hole and it's getting squozen a little bit. I like to think about it. And then it's going out at the other end and hitting the wall. It's not focusing the image, but it's making the image less out of focus with a pinhole. That's sort of the best way I can think about it. The pinhole is just sort of making things seem less out of focus than they are. It's still a little fuzzy. And there's like an infinite depth of field. So there's none of those like focal things that you deal with in photography. But essentially, yeah, a camera obscura in its simplest way is a dark room with something that modulates the light and projects the light onto a surface. And so there's a lot of different versions of it all over. There's some like, whenever I give a lecture about it, there's a camera obscura, I think in San Francisco, that looks like a camera and is looking out over the harbor, and you can see like a projected image down onto a plate in it. I think they use like a periscope for that. So there's other versions like that. But how I was using it's essentially just black plastic on windows. And then instead of using a pinhole, I would be using a very small reading glasses lens. And reading glasses are measured by positive diopters. So if you have a +1 diopter reading glass, it will focus the image at infinity at 1 meter away from the pinhole, or away from the lens. So it's 1 over the diopter is the focal length. So a +1/2 diopter focuses at 2 meters, 1 over a half. A +2 focuses at 0.5 meter. And so you can use these sorts of lenses to project images and focus them at different lengths and make different sized images inside the camera. So yeah, I would just sort of pick a room that had a view and black everything out and then make a little hole in the window. I had these like little pieces of, I had a sheet of metal that had holes cut in a couple different sizes on it. And then it was literally just taping a lens onto it using masking tape. And then I had like the shutter was just a triple thick piece of duct tape, essentially, that I would put over it. And projecting an image onto a screen would be just like I essentially built these screens out of painter's stretcher bars and foam core and a couple pieces of wood that I would attach together with clamps and build a little screen, and it would project it onto that screen. And you could move the screen forward and backwards, change focus. You could change the angles to change how it interacted with the plane of the focus as well. And have screens at different sizes depending on the photo paper that I was using. So by and large, I had like 30-inch rolls of photo paper, and I would cut them in the dark. And if you could see the actual images, you'd see these like crazy weird cut marks on them because I was doing it in the pitch dark. Because color photo paper, you can't have a safe light. So you have to block everything out. And then I'd hang it up with big clamps and then open up the lens and make an image, close the lens, and take the paper away and go process it. So, yeah.
So cool. Essentially what you're doing for people that aren't photographers, you're essentially turning this room into an enlarger. Like
Yeah.
it's like a dark room enlarger, but on a huge scale. And you're piecing it all together to make this all work.
Yeah. Yeah. Just using whatever I had to use. I mean, sometimes I could project onto the wall if the wall was close enough. I've like attached paper to bookcases before, or I've had my easel set up on beds before when I needed to. Very rarely can I like control all the aspects of it. In Seattle, my studio in Seattle was in the former INS building in there, so it was a former immigration naturalization prison essentially, which was a deeply creepy place to have a studio because they still had the solitary confinement cells in there, and they were just converting into artist studios when I moved in there. But I was able at one point to take over this giant room in it that had windows looking in 3 different directions. This is like lower Seattle. And I think I had to cover like 15 windows. Each window was about 15 feet tall by 4 feet wide. But I was able to, once I did that, had this huge dark room essentially, and could have images in all 3 directions looking at, I think one of them is looking at the old the old Amazon headquarters, which is like a weird hospital up on a hill. Another one's looking at the football and baseball stadiums in lower Seattle. And then another one looked sort of across at another part of the building where there were these graffiti, really interesting graffiti on this external part of the building in like tons of different languages. And so it was sort of a self-portrait of the building. And so I was able to control for all of that and build this whole screen and whole system, and that was probably like the most finished version of a camera that I've ever made, and the most controlled version of a camera that I ever did.
Wow.
Yeah.
And if we can geek out a little bit more
Of course.
photographically, all the painters and sculptors, they just tuned out at this point. They're like, this is a photographer's podcast or episode. So, and you were trying to use, because you have the coloration of the paper itself, you were trying to figure out some kind of filter system. Now, when you print color, you have a filter pack that's built in typically in the enlarger that you can dial in a certain color, right, to get the color correct.
Yeah.
Did you use some of the color printing filters to try to do this, or no?
Because if you think about it, those filters are working with light that's already gone through the base of color film. And the base of color film is orange, like an intense orange red look to it. It's not clear like black and white film. And so you have this orangey film that's then being modulated by those filters. And so those filters just were not doing remotely enough to me.
Plus, in an enlarger, you have an incandescent light.
A yellow bulb.
And you're using daylight, which has a much cooler color.
Yeah. So I was
okay.
so massively off that spectrum to start with that I can't even remember where I got them, but I got this like weird little pack of filters of like colored gels essentially. And I went into a bunch of the red ones. And what ended up working for me was, I think it was a pretty intense red gel. And I would use that for, let's say my exposure was 2 minutes. I'd use the red gel for like a minute and a half. And then I would pull it away and just let unfiltered light come in for about 30 seconds. And it would be some combination of unfiltered and filtered light. If I just used those gels, I was getting into the weird blues. And I'm sure there was a correct answer out there, and I never found the correct answer for just like a single filter to use. At some point, it was just, all right, I'm just going to do what's working. I'm going to do this combination of a couple different things, and that's working for me. And I can't experiment anymore on that. So
at some point you get something that you like and that works for you, and you're like, well, I don't necessarily need to push this in a whole other direction when I know I can get results with these particular filters or this technique.
The other part I think that you would enjoy is there's another thing you can do in this, which is I can dodge and burn while I'm making an image too. And so I would have, and you think about like you have this giant screen, 30 inches by 40 inches is where the image is. And sure, In the darkroom, you would take, a piece of paper and put it in front of that. But the beauty of this is that I had a tiny little pinhole. And so my dodging and burning was to attach just like little pieces of tape right in front of the pinhole. And in particular, it would be the sky, because skies would always just, on my first many locations I set up, the sky's black and the image is down below. And then I realized that if I like really aggressively dodged the sky out during the exposure, gave it like less than a quarter of the full amount of exposure, I could start to get clouds in the skies. I could start to get some sort of striations and textures in the sky that I wouldn't get otherwise. So that was really nice. Yeah. And so I'd have to like attach it there and then like touch it to keep it moving so it wouldn't project a sharp line onto the image. And just keep a little bit of dodging going on.
That's funny.
To get the image.
That's cool, man.
Yeah.
That's really cool. Doing the darkroom dance, but on a large scale with a little piece.
Doing the chaotic version of the darkroom dance. Yeah.
I'm going to pull up an image. This is in this particular part of Bailey's portfolio, but this is one of my favorite images from here, this series. And this is the Space Needle, but it's a really beautiful image. I love what's going on in here.
Yeah. This is in that, we were talking about this with the wet plate, right? That's a fail. That worked out beautifully. So that's a giant light leak that came out in the top right corner. So it's it's a landscape of the Space Needle. There's say like buildings in the foreground, and the Space Needle is a little bit off to the left. And then the entire, like at an angle, the top right corner comes down super intense black. The sky is incredibly dark. And then the sky is very light right around the Space Needle. And so that worked out perfectly. That was entirely unintentional. And I believe it was a light leak I don't remember where the light leak was. It might have been in the camera. There might have been like part of the window started to peel off and this light came out and very much overexposed that corner of the image, because overexposures are black since it's negative. Yeah. And so, but no, it's my favorite picture of the needle. I photographed the Space Needle, I think, from 2 different buildings while I was in Seattle. And this was the one that was, for me, the most successful because of that. So
it's a really cool looking photo. Like,
thanks.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
It looks like a storm is about to just take Seattle over. Yeah.
Yeah, man. Like they say, better to be lucky than good, right?
Yep. Yeah. Have you read Sally Mann's autobiography, Hold Still, ever?
No.
Wonderful.
Is it good?
Yeah, she's actually a really good writer. But yeah, like she did wet plate for a long time. And I always joke with my other wet plate friends that like Sally Mann is an atrocious wet plate photographer. She's terrible. And her images are amazing. But she's like intentionally terrible. And it's really like, it's a decision on her part. She does not want to become good at it because then she'll lose interest. And so she leaves all these possibilities for accidents open while she makes her images. And she'll be doing things like pouring her collodion on the side of a highway and a truck drives by and like dirt gets thrown into her plate. And then she uses that anyway, or stuff like that. It works. It totally works, but it is chaos. Wonderful ways. Yeah.
And this image I had pulled up earlier, Cleveland Tower. You said that you took this from your room at your parents' house.
Yeah, it was actually weirdly a closet that had a window, which is strange as a concept. So I think the room I was in was like 3 feet by 3 feet, and so I was just jammed in there, essentially hiding next to the window to let the image go through. My father for a period was a dean at the university there, and he had a house that was on campus that was looking at part of the campus. And so this was from one of their windows. So it's long after I moved out, but I'd go back and steal, views from them every once in a while.
That's cool. It's a cool shot. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's the pseudo Gothic of the Ivy Leagues.
Oh man. Mm-hmm. So you moved to Wyoming, you start teaching, and you've already had all this, great experience experimenting with different rooms, but then you decide you're going to build this trailer camera. Talk about that.
Yeah. I mean, it was 2 things. It was not being able to do what I did. So Wyoming, there's literally no tall buildings. Most of the stuff I'd done was from tall buildings. Interestingly, the tallest building in Wyoming is a dormitory on campus. in the entire state of Wyoming. So
Oh,
it's 9 stories. But it was that. It was the fact that there's no color processors anywhere nearby. I don't want to process my own color paper. That's just sort of an awful thing to do. And I don't think there was a lab in Denver. The closest lab was probably Salt Lake City. So there was no way I could make color images anymore.
What year was this?
I moved there in 2012, 2011. Yeah. I
Yeah,
looked, but I
so
couldn't find anything.
yeah, I
But
think
even
all
if I
the
had, it wouldn't have been, I'm not
still
going
it wouldn't have
to
been
Denver to
feasible, right?
process things. Yeah. And I had always wanted to make a mobile camera. There's a limitation when you're in someone's bedroom in that you can't really move it closer or, shift it a little bit to the left. When I was working for Vera in the coal mine, our camera was a shipping container and we had it placed with a crane. And then at some point, it was decided that we needed to have a different vantage point. And the process for that was I was inside the shipping container with my eyes accustomed to the light on a cell phone talking to Vera, who was outside the shipping container with the crane operators who picked it up while I was inside and carefully shifted it. And I was like, well, this is what the image looks like now. All right, we're going to pick it up again and move it a little bit as I got seasick inside of this thing. And then again. So I couldn't do that with houses. And so that led me to wanting to get a trailer. And so I bought a box trailer, like a little U-Haul style box trailer essentially, and turned that into a camera. Yeah, that was the first time I took it out. I really just wanted to fit in Wyoming, so we got a pickup truck and we got a dog, and then I got a box trailer.
and
So
that'll do it. Then you become a Wyoming person.
I was a Wyomingite, yeah. And so this camera, if you see, there's actually a giant lens on it, which is a little different. So I found this online. It is a process lens, a 760 millimeter process lens. So it's what like printmakers would use to essentially enlarge art to project it onto screens for screen printing. And it projects an image that is 50 inches wide. So it's gigantic. It projects an incredible, gigantic, sharp image inside of it. And so this is what I started playing with in Wyoming. Um, it's a great teaching tool. It's wonderful to be able to bring students into it and see what a camera looks like from the inside, see how sharp it is. And we could also like play with selective focus and shifting and tilting and all that sort of stuff. It took me a really long time to figure out what to do with it in terms of my own artwork. It was not as easy as I thought. Part of the problem was, I'm making black and white images with it. And if I shot in positive, it just sort of looked like really bad prints. And if I shot negative, it was too close to what I'd been doing with Vera. And I was trying to push away from that. And I always felt a little weird about taking things that I learned from her to use on my own. So it took me a while to figure out how to use it. And I think it was that Harman positive paper I was talking about earlier that really sort of solved that problem because it has this very dreamlike feeling to the paper. It's not super. So if you look at the square, the top ones there, yeah, the first 5 essentially are the ones I'm most happy about. So these were positives, direct positives. So the paper in the camera is what you're seeing right there. And yeah, it's a flawed paper. It has issues, it has problems, it has contrast issues and other things like that. But I liked the level of detail and the dreaminess as they work together. And so I started photographing the alleyways in Laramie, partly because they were the exact size of the truck I was in. I took up the entire alleyway, and there was just something sort of nice about like blocking this whole thing off and photographing down this little dirt road that was a utilitarian dirt road that was between all the houses and all the roads here. Yeah.
It does have a really cool quality to it.
Yeah. Yeah.
That dreamlike quality you were talking about. This is really cool. I really love this one. Alleyway number 8. If you go into the trailer camera section of Bailey's portfolio,
Yeah.
that looks like, again, it's a fairly timeless photograph. There's nothing that really stands out that says, modern day.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I think I was reading some of Sally Mann's work when I was making these, and she talked about how, and something that stuck with me from her writing and speaking was about how, I mean, she's a Southerner. She's from the from North Virginia and North Carolina, and how Southern artists are comfortable with the idea of nostalgia and with the idea of romance, and how other artists, Northern artists, are not comfortable with that. And I so thoroughly fall into that category. I have no comfort level with romanticism and nostalgia and those sorts of things. But with those images, I felt like I was getting closest to that idea, getting closest to that sort of hazy, dreamlike, romantic feeling.
Yeah.
These other ones I've never been happy with, and I'm still not super happy with.
Really, this one that I have up right now, I think is one of my favorites as well. It's Casper Show 7.
Yeah.
It's composed really well. It has some really cool graphic elements to it. It's really moody. Yeah, I think it's a nice photograph, man.
Thank you. I started these, so I wanted a counterpoint to the alleyways, and I sort of was thinking about them as full and empty. Alleyways being these like tighter, more controlled images, and these are all on the edge of Laramie. And so Laramie is a town of 30,000 people in a county of 31,000. It's just empty around it. And I'm not used to that. I'm from New Jersey, where just one town sprawls into the next, into the next, into the next. And so this idea that there's just literally empty space when the town ends, that at some point I got obsessed with those road end signs, those like barricades that they put on the ends of roads with the orange and white stripes. And I went around and photographed every single one in Laramie and made a little book out of those, because I just thought that was awesome that roads just ended. And in New Jersey, none of the roads end. They just like go to the next town.
Right.
And so that was, I found really interesting. And so this emptiness around it. And so I like this idea of just empty space. Yeah.
Very cool. Are you still using this trailer to this day?
No, I decided that was done, and I traded it to our retiring ceramics professor for a very large ceramics art piece of hers. Yeah, I was looking up because it's right there.
That's funny. That's funny.
She needed a trailer. I took the lens. I took the lens out, and I undid things, and I just traded her the trailer for some art. Yeah,
that's interesting. So do you think you'll ever go back to that, or is that something that you would ever do again? Do you think you're done?
I'm probably done. Probably. Yeah.
It's interesting.
I've come back to it as like a teaching thing, but not as an art making thing. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So in that last photograph we were talking about, Casper Show number 7, it has a windmill in it, which leads me to this current work that you kind of touched on a little bit earlier in the podcast. And if you go to Bailey's section, first section that you come upon, extraction and energy, you can see some of this work. Talk about what this work is about, the theme of this work, and how it came about, and elaborate a little bit more on the process.
Yeah. So content-wise, it came from a different project in a way. So I did a project that was entirely chemical in the darkroom. So chemigrams, which is essentially taking expired photo paper and then doing things you're not supposed to do them with chemicals. So it's a lot of like developer and fixer and a couple other different things back and forth. Yeah, these ones. And so it's a very abstract process in that you're just basically getting colors and tones out of it. And I like that as a fun thing to do, but I didn't think it was very interesting. And so I started bringing content to it. And the content I brought was in the form of, I was laser cutting stencils out of cardboard. And then I'd take those stencils and I'd soak them in chemicals, and then I'd place them on the paper. So like we're looking at one now of a pronghorn. The pronghorn is very dark, which means that I had soaked it in developer, and then I placed it on the paper, and the developer exposed the paper and processed the paper. This is like pre-exposed paper. So it processed the paper, and then I would put fixer on it, and the fixer would work around it, and you get this like very dreamlike colors and shapes and blobs going all around it. And the imagery that I started being drawn to towards this was the idea of the things that you would see, not so much the animals, but the objects would be the things that you'd see while driving on the highway. And the thing I was thinking about was like, I mean, I do so much driving. We live out here. There's so much space between everything, and you're you want to go to the next town. For me, that's a 45-minute drive to Cheyenne or a 50-minute drive to Fort Collins. And so I'm on these long stretches of highway. And at least in our area, we're on the high plains, there's mountains in the distance, but it's just huge, vast, empty plains. And the things that I would see on the vast, empty plains would be windmills, pump jacks, and snow fences. Those are sort of the things that stick out of the landscape. And they're all man-made. Most of them are energy related, but I got to that later. But my thought when doing these is I wanted to make these images of like sort of like the things that stick in your mind subliminally when you're going on these drives, and you finish it and you're like, I remember these structures and I remember these forms. It's not anything specific, but like any specific locations or anything like that. So I was trying to play into that dreamlike feeling with the process and then adding those objects as content.
So we're looking at one that has a pump jack or whatever.
Yeah.
Is that a stencil or that's a stencil? So you cut that image out. Same with the pronghorn. You cut him out as a stencil. Okay.
So it's like a really thin piece of cardboard.
Gotcha.
One of the beauties of teaching is that I get access to stuff. And our graphic design department had a laser cutter. And so I was uploading these files into the laser cutter and cutting out on really thin cardboard. And then I take the cardboard. And so the process in this darkroom is that, I set up a bunch of trays, and the trays tend to be fixer, like strong fixer, strong developer, dilute fixer, dilute developer, 2 water baths, and then sometimes I use a couple other like chromo chemicals and a couple other things that will do other interesting things to the paper. And so I'll soak the stencil in something. If I want it light, I'll soak it in fixer. If I want it dark, I'll soak it in developer, and then I'll get my paper wet, place it onto like the back of another tray, and then place the stencil onto it, move it around maybe, or let it still, let something happen, and then pull it off, wash it, and then go into the other chemicals one after another, back and forth. And you get the colors by like going into fixer and then developer immediately, and then back to fixer. And you just destroy all your chemicals by doing these processes. Everything is completely dead when you're done.
Everything that you tell your students not to do, you're doing.
Don't do that. Yes. Do not cross-contaminate your chemicals, except when you want to cross-contaminate your chemicals.
Right. I find these very interesting. Very compelling. So
yeah, I really enjoyed making them. They're just, I've been collecting paper. Another aspect of being a university professor is people drop off boxes of crap.
Right.
All the time. This past summer, I cleaned out an entire dark room in Laramie, and I have so much stuff from that. Like, a woman's father passed away, and she just wanted to get rid of everything. It's like, yep, all right, I'll take it. So I've got these papers from like the 1940s that are amazing because they have silver. They have so much silver in them. Like modern black and white photo paper does not have silver compared to these things. It's like all these photochemical dyes they've been swapping in for the silver slowly over time. But the silver reacts with these things in really radically different ways with the chemicals. It can be really beautiful. Yeah.
That's crazy. Anyway,
it's a gold mine, man. A silver mine.
Silver mine. Yep. It's beautiful that way. So anyway, that was the imagery that I had been thinking about. And that sort of translated into looking at energy production. I mean, everything comes from what you saw a long time ago. And so going back to Vera again, when we were at the coal mine in Germany, I remember at one point we went to this park nearby the coal mine, and the park was entirely on repurposed land. Like, it used to be the mine, and then they built a park when the mine moved on a little bit farther. They were literally picking up towns and putting them behind the coal mine, and putting like literally the buildings, they would pick them up and move them 2 miles to the east to put it behind the coal mine. It was totally crazy. But we went to this place, and we get onto this hill, and we're looking out over the landscape. And this is like Northwest Germany, super flat. And the only things on the landscape were energy production. There was this giant coal mine. There were like 3 coal power plants. There were a bunch of windmills. And then there were these like other weird little mines off in Belgium that you could sort of see in the distance. And that was it. Everything else was flat. It's like the only stuff was energy production that you could see all around. And sometimes I feel like it's the same thing here in Wyoming. Like energy runs Wyoming.
Yep.
All our money comes from energy. All the university's money comes from energy. And you see it everywhere. And so I wanted to talk about that. I wanted to make these images of these things because they're also beautiful. Like in the same way that Emmet was turning these nuclear bomb explosions into gorgeous things, I wanted to take these pump jacks, which I think they're really cool looking, and just as like abstract sculptures, they're sort of amazing, and turn them into something interesting. Was the content side of this? Yeah. And so then it went through like lots of different ways of thinking about this idea. I did an entire landscape black and white photo project just on film during COVID, and some of the snow fence stuff sort of got resolved in that one. But then I started photographing these pump jacks, and at the same time, a student of mine named Shulov started being interested in cyanotypes, and I just randomly, I think it was, came across online this French woman whose Instagram handle is like Alinea, I think it is, who does cyanotype on glass. And I saw her work and I thought it was just gorgeous, absolutely beautiful how she was doing it. And so we decided with my student to learn how to do this, which was, like everything else I do, really problematic and difficult, and tons of failures because her process did not work. And the other processes I found online did not work. And we had to figure out how to, basically, it was all about ratios. So these are cyanotypes, which is a iron-based photo printing process that was invented 1850, probably, by Sir John Herschel, I think his name is. And it's what blueprints are made out of traditionally. It is very cheap and very easy and very slow, in that it's a very low ISO, incredibly slow process. And it's a great learning tool. So back in the day, people would use it for like contact prints of large format photography because it was so incredibly cheap compared to silver. But it makes a blue image, and blue is difficult to make beautiful art. That's just pure blue. I've always found is so. But because of that cheapness and that slowness and that malleability of it, this idea of attaching it to gelatin and then adhering that to glass is what we were working with there. So we started to play around with how to get that. And then the gold leaf that had been sitting on my mind for 25 years came back, and I started putting gold leaf behind it to give it this glow and this warmth to it and to fill in the clear areas. So essentially the process would be where it's dark, it's blue, and where it's light, it's perfectly clear. So it's just glass at that point. And trying to fill that in and add another element of mineral, basically of another metallic element to these processes is what I found interesting. Yeah. And then eventually ended up as ovals because I've never made oval art before. Yeah.
So you're actually exposing them on these oval pieces of glass?
Yeah. So I get the ovals cut, and then I coat it with the cyanotype solution. You do that in the dark room. You let it dry. And then if it doesn't completely flake and peel off, you have to take it to an exposure unit. I can't use the sun because the sun's too hot. And I can't use our normal exposure unit because it's way too hot. If I used either of those, the gelatin would just melt. So I ended up using a silk screening exposure unit I have stolen from our printmakers, and it's incredibly slow. So like an exposure is about 40 minutes in this unit. And you have to basically, you make a little sandwich with your piece of glass with the gelatin, and then you put a digitally printed transparency negative onto it, and then you expose it that way. And then one of the other great, wonderful things about cyanotypes is you don't have to use any chemicals to process it. It's just water. So you just take the plate and you put it into a bath of slightly warm water and wash it for a little while, and the unexposed parts just float away. And you're left with the positive image at that point.
Yeah. I thought there was ammonia, because I can remember like in architecture, there was always the machine that would make the blueprints always had that ammonia smell to it, but maybe that was something else.
No, that's the chemical of the actual cyanotype. So cyanotype, okay. I always forget the names. Formula. It is ferric ammonium citrate and potassium ferrocyanide. So the ammonium's in the ferric ammonium citrate, which is one of the two main chemicals that go together to make the light sensitive solution.
Gotcha.
The other chemical that you can use is hydrogen peroxide. If you're doing this on paper or cloth, especially if you're doing it in class, you add hydrogen peroxide to it after you've processed it, and it like radically and quickly intensifies the color because it oxidizes it. But that's something that would happen normally anyway. And if you did that to these, it would bubble it and just destroy it immediately. So
Sure.
you can't. I found that out the hard way by destroying a print.
So what are you printing on for the negative?
Transparency. We have a large format inkjet printer, and I'm just doing digital editing to make a negative and then printing it on the printer.
Okay.
So very simple. Yeah. Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
These are beautiful, and I think it's brilliant
Oh.
because in this day and age, everybody's a photographer. Everybody has a camera in their back pockets, right? We've heard this all a billion times. But what makes these so magnificent is that they look like a piece. I mean, it looks like fine art. Photography has always been the redheaded stepchild of the art world. And, it's a hard sell, like I said, these days. We've talked to numerous galleries that's like, it's hard to get people to buy photography. But these are something completely different. And when I saw them, I was just like, oh my God, I'm over the moon. Like, so smart.
Thank you.
Taking this process and taking it to, there's multiple levels to this, which I appreciate in the process of it.
Yeah. They're tactile in a way that most photographs aren't, which I really enjoy. These objects, and they're shiny. I mean, it sounds really weird to say that shiny is a good thing, but shiny is sometimes sort of amazing, and that they glow. They have this glow to them. The other side of that is that they're impossible to photograph.
Oh, I bet.
It's so hard to get good images of these. These are scans, actually. So I've made them small enough that I can put them on a scanner bed, because otherwise it's just glare. Or if there's no glare, they just look dead. And so documenting them has been a pain in the ass to figure out.
I was just going to ask you right before you said scanner. I'm like, I bet if you scan them. So makes sense.
That's the only way to do it. Yeah. I have to give a talk every year in this class we have called Exiting Strategies about documenting your artwork. And every year, and it didn't really hit until I started making these, but one of the things I say to the students is don't make shiny art, because you can't photograph it. Right. And then I've spent the last 2 years making shiny art now. Yeah.
I think this style too really lends itself to the subject matter. And it's with everything that's going on in the world with energy and, the ability to use wind and solar, and then in today's political climate that, we're trying to get rid of that. I think this has a good narrative that's very apropos to today. And I think this captures that really interesting. And I can only imagine seeing the pieces live in person. It's even far better because of the gold leaf and everything.
Yeah. Yeah. One thing that was happening when I was making these was our governor in Wyoming, Mark Gordon, was instituting what he calls his all of the above energy policy, which I just sort of found as a nice little thing to steal from him. Like it's for him, it's, not putting your eggs in one single thing. And he's willing to like try out green and fossil and everything, and not, be beholden to anything. But for this, it's also, I was interested in that as like a guiding line for this. I wanted to do all of the above when looking at different ways that we interact with these types of minerals. Look at like all the different approaches that we have to it, and treat them equally, right? Not try to put my finger on scales, like allow them to be approached equally by the viewers, and to see the pump jack in the same light as the solar panel farm, as the windmills.
Yeah. And now you guys are exploring nuclear again.
Yep. It hasn't. I was gonna try to. They were going to break ground, but I don't think they ended up doing that. And I wanted to get out there and try to photograph it, but there's nothing. It doesn't exist yet.
Oh, okay. I didn't know how far they were in. I know they're very serious, and I know Bill Gates is like huge behind it, because he's been exploring nuclear for years, decades.
Yeah.
So.
No, I wanted to photograph a reactor. I haven't been able to get to one.
Sure.
last year. Like I keep getting close. And it's like, I just can't quite figure out how to get there. But yeah.
I think there's still one in Cedar Rapids, Iowa.
Yeah, I was driving to Minneapolis last summer, and I tried to structure the trip around it, and it just didn't quite work out.
Oh, is that right? Yeah, yeah. I lived in Cedar Rapids for a while, and in the back of the phone, and they had phone books back then when I lived there. In the back of the phone book was the evacuation routes, depending on where you lived, if there was a nuclear issue. So, nice. And I actually worked for the company that had the nuclear. I worked for Alliant Energy. There was a big merger and they had nuclear and Wisconsin Power and Light, and I can't even remember the other two, but and one of them was the nuclear. So I worked right there, going in HR. So yeah, so it is kind of weird, like when you look in the back and it's like, oh, I live on this street, so this is the way I go just in case of an emergency. So
post 3 Mile Island,
right.
Yeah.
So
funny. Yeah.
No, these are so cool.
They are very cool. This one that I have pulled up right now is called Pump Jack 4, but I think it has a different name at the gallery. I think it's called...
the names on my website are not. I've sort of been laughing every time you read out the names because they're just. I think they're just file names, and
okay.
But I'm also really bad at naming things. That's I'm not good at that. Names change when I go to a different show or what have you. It's not very good at that.
So if you go to Bitfactory and you look at this particular image, it's called Wildcat Creek Oil Field, I believe. Yeah. And you actually, I love pump jacks. My dad worked in the oil and gas industry his entire life. And for a little bit before I figured out what I wanted to do with my life, I worked for that company. And so I've been all over the Western states and weird places. I've been to Texas in the oil fields where all you see is these pump jacks on the plains.
Yeah.
The air smells of oil, the water tastes of oil. And it's an interesting place to be for sure. And to think that people, do this work. But I always, whenever I see a pump jack as I'm driving through, northern Colorado or in Wyoming, there's something about them that just resonates with me, not just because of that experience, but they're just interesting objects, right? They're very graphic.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, they look alive, which
they do.
I love. Yeah. And later in this project, I started photographing the giant high tension power lines. And I feel like those also, they essentially look like anime monsters. I don't think they're on this website. I haven't updated the website since I made those images.
Okay. Here's a nice one actually that has windmills and...
Oh, a pump jack in the bottom.
Yeah. Pump jack and power lines in it.
Yeah. Yep. All of the above. It's right there.
Now, that image that I had pulled up before, you actually won an award for that image, did you not? Or is it for the whole series?
It was for the whole thing. So Wyoming has this really nice, or they used to, I think they've actually stopped it because of some issues. But they have a arts fellowship that they give out every year. So you can apply. They give out, I think, 3 of them a year. And it comes with some money, but also... every 2 years, they put together a big group museum show of the last 2 years worth of winners, and you're allowed to win it twice in your life. So I won it for the second time with this project about 1.5 years ago, and had the show in the fall up in Casper of these images. Yeah. So
and what is it called?
The Wyoming Arts Fellowship is the name of it, but the Wyoming Arts Council just lost a lot of their money in the recent budget cuts, and they had to cancel the call for last year. So who knows if it's going to happen again?
That's too bad.
Which would be a shame because it's a lot of great artists have gotten this over the years. Yeah.
Now, is this the same thing as that Dennis Rosal?
Oh, that was
award?
No, you're right. I'd forgotten about that. That was an online award. Yeah. The Dennis Rosal. Yeah. That image. You're right. That was from that. Yeah.
Okay. So that was that image that won that award, or the whole series?
Yeah, I think it was just that one image.
Okay. All right.
I think. Yeah.
Nice.
Thanks. Yeah. Good. You know it better than I do. Yeah.
There's so much great imagery, and it's not just, some of these are not just painted gold. Some of them are actually painted silver as well, right?
Yeah, I started using silver recently. That's within the last couple months. at first I hadn't liked what it looked like. The first times I tried it, but then I realized that what I needed to do was to darken the images, and the silver started to be much more interesting. When I first tried it, I think I had much brighter images, and the silver was really flat. It just didn't have the depth of gold and the texture of the gold. But once I really darkened it, there was a lot more of the blue bouncing off of the silver, and it intensified the silver in a really interesting way. Yeah, that one that you're looking at there is one of my favorite of the silver, just again for the flaws, for the problems. Like all of that. It's an oval of some pump jacks, and the top is incredibly ripply and sort of falling apart. And the like all of the emulsion was trying to leave the plate as I was processing it. And I was like, basically trying to leave it in the water just long enough to get the unexposed iron out, but not too long that the entire image would float away, because this one was on the verge of just disappearing entirely.
Wow.
So it's always this little tension with these ones if it's not quite as stable as it should be. If I don't process it enough, it has these like weird yellow tones and sort of nasty colors in it. And if I process it enough, it disappears. So trying to balance that is always difficult. Yeah.
So when people go to see this show at Bitfactory, what all are they going to see? Kind of describe it just a little bit. You described it a little bit as far as what they're going to see in the gallery.
Yeah. So, I mean, just technically looking at it, it's sort of split into three different groups of images, but these tend to be pretty small images of pump jacks, windmills, other types of energy and extraction related things. I decided a while ago to start making them in oval shape because I liked how that sort of referenced these early calling cards and other types of like early daguerreotypes where you'd have these beautiful little portraits in these velvet cases that were oval or circles or what have you. And then I figured out how to make oval frames, which is one of the crowning achievements of my artistic life recently, working with our wood shop to cut oval frames for all of them. But anyway, there's a whole series of the oval prints, some silver, some gold. There's a series of rectangular prints of the power lines. So different shape, and that's sort of a discrete set of 9 of those. And then there's 2 multi-panel pieces where it's 4 pieces, 4 plates. Each one's about 11 by 14 that together make a large panoramic. One of those is of the Shirley Basin Windmill Farm in central Wyoming, and the other one is of the Sinclair refinery in the town of Sinclair, Wyoming, which is a just giant refinery with a tiny little town surrounding it. So yeah, and they're spread out throughout the gallery, about a total of maybe 30 or 40, 35 or so images total.
It's a really lovely show, and Bill always does a wonderful job hanging and laying out his shows. He has an impeccable eye. Yeah. But truly, if you go to Bailey's website and you look at these, or even the Bitfactory website, they're spectacular, but you really need to get down there and see them for yourself in person, because myself as a photographer, I had seen the press release come across, my email, and then Bill had reached out to me the day of and said, "Hey, are you going to come down to this show?" And I'm like, well, it was on my radar, but I wasn't sure I was going to come that night. And I'm so glad I did. I got to meet you, but just seeing this work in person, like so many other pieces of art, it makes a difference seeing it with your own eyes in person.
Yeah. I'm drawn to this because of the glow. And like my only other photography I can sort of think of is Jeff Wall and his like giant prints on light boxes, and they literally glow and reach out towards you. And I wanted something that would have that same sort of presence in a way that more traditional photography doesn't have that life to it in the same way that's reflective. Yeah. And so I really liked how the leaf added that to it. Yeah.
Absolutely. And these are all very reasonably priced. I will say that right now. I think they're all in the $400 to $500 range for the most part, right?
That's right. Yeah. I let Bill decide that. That's his call.
How big are these?
These are 8x10s. So
8x10s.
Small. Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
I got another weird question. So when you're out driving around shooting these, pump jacks and the refineries or the do you have people asking you what the hell you're doing?
No, I live in Wyoming. There's no
Oh,
one here.
because nobody's there.
No, I'm a little bit of a shy photographer.
Okay.
I'm not super comfortable being in places I'm not supposed to be,
Yeah, that'd be
or
me too.
having people come talk to me. That's a
Right.
cat on the piano in the background. Um, Literally, the cat is walking across the piano right now.
Beautiful. Love
Dude.
it.
Yeah, there
Be the
he's
new
there.
intro music for the show.
I mean, yeah. Is he just going to sit down on that thing? He likes to do this. Anyway,
Nice.
coming back to that. Yeah, so I tend to be subtle
Yeah.
and try to stay out of people's way. I haven't had too many conversations. All right, give me a second.
No, that's fine.
Dude, what are you doing? There you go.
It's hilarious.
Yeah. Just going for a stroll across the piano. Oh,
And I'm a
yeah.
big rule follower too. So like I would love to shoot them, but I would have to use like a long lens and not like I would never trespass on
Yeah.
freaking land like that because they will come after you.
I mean, people in Wyoming have guns. Yeah, I'm
Yes, and
aware of
there's
that.
that.
Yeah. No, and these were shot in like all different sorts of ways, from me getting very close with a wide angle lens to there was a handful, the power line ones, I couldn't figure out how to get to them. There was this one section of power pylons in central Wyoming off of I-80, but there were no roads near them. And so I was driving to Salt Lake one weekend with a friend, and I had him drive, and I just literally photographed from the moving car as we were
Oh,
going with a big lens. And I was just photographing nonstop for like 10 minutes as we went through this section of them.
that's
Um,
cool.
I maybe more stupidly once photographed some pump jacks while I was driving with a big lens. That was not the greatest choice, but
I've done kind of crazy shit like that too. Not with a necessarily a big lens, but shooting off the shoulder, like, oh,
yeah.
this is, yeah.
There was one shot I wanted. There's halfway between Laramie and Cheyenne. There's this hill on the side of the highway that has a pump jack at the top of the hill, just like perfect silhouette at the top, and then a windmill right behind it. And I wanted that shot, but the only place you can take it is from the side of the road. And every time I try to pull over on the side of the road, like 15 trucks would go flying past me, and I just sort of freak out because I didn't want to pull back into traffic with it.
Right.
And so I ended up photographing that while driving 60 miles an hour down the highway with a giant 400 millimeter telephoto lens.
That's awesome.
And I got the image. So it worked.
There you
It
go.
was all good. Yeah.
Oh man.
Yeah.
I know you've shown a lot with a lot of different people, a lot of different galleries. Do you have galleries that you work specifically with at
No,
this
never
point?
had stable representation. Like I've shown twice now with Bill, and that's the most. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I haven't really pushed for it, but also I'm not great at schmoozing and talking to people that way. So it hasn't. And I live really far away from galleries.
Right.
Yeah.
Is there
So
any kind of gallery scenario in Laramie?
no,
Okay.
no. There's a tiny little gallery that you can rent that I rented with my students the other day for a show, but no, that's about it. Yeah. It's a town of 30,000 people. It's very small.
Yeah.
Well, you never know,
Yeah.
You go to these small towns, you never know what you're going to see. And I like Laramie a lot, actually.
Oh yeah, it's a lovely town.
It
Yeah.
is.
But
Do you have other shows coming up this year that you have scheduled?
um not really. I'm gonna be in a group show on campus at our university art museum. It's sort of a faculty related show, but it was like a juried faculty show. Weirdly, I'm showing totally different work there, showing some infrared photographs of animals. Uh, Completely different digital
Yeah.
infrared work. But no, I don't have anything going on, partly because there's a very good chance that I'm leaving the country. And I haven't really wanted to commit to anything. We're probably moving to Norway this summer
Oh, wow.
as a family, to Trondheim, Norway. So that is sort of taking up most of my bandwidth in the near future.
Sure.
Yeah. It's a
So
big move. And,
it is.
but also sounds exciting to me.
I'm very excited. Yeah, it's looking forward to seeing there. My wife is actually, so I'm solo parenting right now because my wife is in Trondheim checking it out and talking with her employers there. We will make our decision next week if we're going to move.
Wow.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Will you talk about it a little bit? Is she enjoying what she's seeing and what she's experiencing?
Yeah, we have not seen any red flags. So my wife's a fish biologist who is employed by USGS, and our current federal government has been trying to fire her for 9 months now, along with everyone else she works with. So she's been looking for jobs, and she is a Norwegian citizen as well. So we've been looking
she is.
Scandinavia, yeah.
Oh,
She's half Norwegian, half British, but has an American passport now. So that allows her to work here. Okay. She's very talented in terms of her nationality. She also has a green card for Hong Kong.
Oh, wow.
Dang.
It's she had an interesting childhood. But yeah, she's very excited to move back to Norway. She left Norway when she was 3 years old, so she's never lived there really. And
does she speak the language?
She speaks fluently. She's been speaking to our daughter Norwegian since she was born, so our daughter understands Norwegian.
Oh, wow.
So her transition should be pretty good. I'm the one who's a little bit screwed.
I bet you they speak pretty good English in Norway.
Their English is perfect.
Yeah. I got a feel. I've watched a few Ewan McGregor and Charlie Borman travel around, and they always run into people that speak really good English. So
no, their English is better than a lot of our English. So
yeah.
That's all of Europe. All of Europe, everybody speaks at least 2, if not 3 different languages.
Yep.
Yeah.
We're the only dumb ones.
Yeah, pretty much.
It's American or nothing at all.
Yeah.
That's our attitude here.
Oh, man.
Yeah. So it's going to be a lot, but yeah.
Well,
it's exciting. I'm excited for you, man.
Yeah. Wish you well. That'd be great.
Yep.
Anything else that you want to talk about tonight before we leave off?
That was pretty exhaustive. That was a good 2.5 hours.
Yeah.
There was a lot to talk about. I mean, there was plenty more we could have talked about, but I think we hit all the highlights for the most part. And I definitely wanted everybody needs to go down and check out the show at Bitfactory. It really is spectacular. I was highly impressed and really enjoyed it. So get down there and check it out.
I think the only other thing I'd say is that if you're looking at art programs, think about the University of Wyoming. We have a wonderful undergraduate art program and a stunningly beautiful building. It's the only art building I've ever been in that was purpose-built for being an art building.
Yeah.
A little of my undergrad and grad school were both like repurposed middle schools that got turned into art buildings, and this one is perfect.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
And actually, the University of Wyoming campus is a really lovely campus.
Yeah. And there's a good museum there that has some great shows. Yeah.
Fantastic.
Yep.
Well, hey, Bailey, thank you so much for taking time out of your weeknight. And I know you had already put your daughter to bed, but doing the solo parenting thing this week and holding down the fort, we really appreciate you carving out time for us this evening. And are you coming down for First Friday?
I will. I'll be there next Friday. Yep.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Fantastic. So everybody that's listening to this airs the day before the 6th, which is the first Friday here in Denver. So come on down. You can see the work in person and meet Bailey yourself.
Come talk to me and ask me as many questions as you can.
There you go.
Happy to talk. Yeah.
There you go. Hey, I've really enjoyed this. This is a great conversation. I love the alternative practices in photography, just because we're all shooting digital now. So, and Todd and I talked way back when I lived in Denver, when digital was coming, that one day this would be like how things would go, is, the diehards would go back to the alternative practices and have a renaissance of that. And your stuff is, I loved your trip down the river. I thought that stuff is really good. The show you got going on down at Bitfactory, amazing stuff, really unique. I'm hoping I can make it down there. That would be great. But man, I really appreciate the fact that we've been able to spend this time with you and talk before your trip, maybe to Norway. So
yeah, thank you. It's been wonderful to talk to you guys. It's been great.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Once again, you can check out Bailey's work via his website, baileyrussel.wordpress.com, and you can follow Bailey on Instagram at Bailey_Russel. Russel. Bailey's solo exhibition, Western Extraction, is on display through March 14th, 2026 at Bitfactory, located at 851 Santa Fe Drive in Denver. Come on out, check it out, and buy some art, buy some photography. As usual, I will have all this and more in this week's episode notes. For the Tenant Podcast, I'm Todd Pearson.
And I'm Wes Brown. Have a great week.